Well, I don't know. Oh, there's plenty.
Hopefully you can hear us online. Thank you all for joining us. I guess in working with the board, I respect the work that you do and I respect your time. So we will finish at 11 today, but this is a real important meeting. So thank you all for being here. Before I forget, thank you Keith, Frank, Howard, everybody for setting us up. We had a little bit of a crisis yesterday. I was starting to panic, but as I said to Keith, the one thing I miss about working is not having a help desk. So you guys are awesome. The whole team here, Getty was here yesterday setting us up and whatever. So as far as our objectives for our work session, and if you can't hear me online, let me know. I apologize. My allergies are bothering me. Worked here in 20 years, the allergies came back. But Josh, if you want to go to the next slide, please. The goal today is to review and provide feedback on the situation analysis that this team has conducted, and particularly the conclusions and recommendations. You know, Amy did send a one-page conclusion and recommendation, and for those in the room, we have a one-pager here when we get to that point. And then secondly, if we have time, we'd like to brainstorm on preliminary goals. So just, you know, preliminary 5-year goals. And we're talking about a strategic plan. We're thinking 5 years. Hopefully we'll get to that, but if we don't, that's okay. And we'll make that decision during the meeting. As far as our agenda, we're going to review a couple background slides. I know the board had the pre-read. There's a couple more slides in here. We're going to review the situation analysis and the conclusions implications. I would say that we budgeted about 30 minutes. It might be painful to go through. I know half of my committee thought it was too much, half thought it was about right. I guess my only commitment would be this will be the last time you'll see this. So, and there will be a quiz at the end. So, and then really have a board breakout or, you know, committee board breakout where we talk about the conclusions, implications. And Josh is prepared to make notes online. You know, what surprised you? What did you think? Did we miss anything? And then we'll open up the public comments if there's any. And like I said, the asterisk here is that if we get through all that, and it takes us till 11 o'clock, we'll end the meeting. If we have time to start thinking about goals, I can lay out some groundwork of what a goal should be and what we're thinking about. If we get to that point, great. If not, that's okay. So I just wanted to acknowledge our team members. I think everybody is in, a lot of people here like Jenny and Helen and Frank and Gary. I think Wes is online. I believe Becky is online. So I just want to thank the team. Next slide, Josh, I'm sorry. One more. There you go. And I just want to acknowledge the Strategic Planning Committee. You know, unlike other committees, not to discount anybody's work because these committees do phenomenal work, there isn't a strategic plan at this point. So it's not like we're fixing something, we're creating something from scratch. So it's a lot of nuts and bolts, looking at data and going through a strategic planning process. And it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of time, but I really believe this is something that should be done every 4 to 5 years. And I think it's going to make everybody's life a lot easier. I also just want to acknowledge, formerly Colette was our board liaison, and now Amy, so appreciate the involvement. Both have been great. And then also Josh and Steve, our board or our staff liaisons. And Steve, as busy as he is, he always provides whatever we need. And Josh, we won't be anywhere without Josh. So thank you, Josh. Next slide. I struggled with a definition or why strategic planning is important. I apologize with the light a little bit. I'm looking at my screen. So it's a process of determining the future of the organization and what organizational resources will need to achieve those goals. It's the roadmap to success as we define it. And it's also, and I really do believe this, I worked at companies that didn't have a strategic plan and they floundered. You know, they didn't have a clear direction. I think it's, you know, as leaders, it's one of the most important things we could be spending time on. So I know there's a lot of things that have to be done on a day-to-day basis. We'll take this over time. This won't be our only work session, but I do believe it's going to make everybody's jobs a little bit easier. Not only the boards, but John's, the staffs. So I really do believe in it. The one thing I mentioned is it gives you permission to say no. Once you have a plan that's based on property owner input, and I give the example, I was VP of marketing at Purdue, and the sales rep would come up, or VP of sales says, "We need more new products. We need more new products." I'd say, Mary, you know what our strategic plan says is focus on the products we introduced, not new products. You can actually apply that to amenities. In our case, where the property owner said, no, we don't really need or want new amenities, focus on your current amenities, okay? So when things come up, oh, we need a new this or new that, you might look at it and there might be an exception, depending on the cost, depending on the ROI, but in general, it's focused on what you have, because what you have is really good, it just needs to be updated. So just a little bit of why strategic plan. I have about 6 different versions. I couldn't really find a succinct thing, but I shared that. Next slide, Josh. And then just importantly, strategic planning, anything I've learned, it's a process. You start with situation analysis, you go to goals, you go to objectives and strategies, you develop your plans, and then you start tracking those plans and how do we do? Are we on track? Are we not on track? And you come back to starting over again. So it's an ongoing process, much like a budgeting process, but maybe long-term and not as painful. This is taken from, I guess I've probably worked on about 30 or 40 or 50 strategic plans, depending on a brand or a channel throughout my career, all in the food business. But I was selected to teach strategic planning at Hershey's and Kraft. And so I guess they say when you teach something, you really get to understand it. But the purpose of this slide is just to show you that we're at a funnel, and there's a lot of work been done over the 6 to 9 months by this committee. We're about to share that, Josh, and just hit the button one more time. Next slide, I'm sorry. And then one more. We're at the conclusions and implications. We did a lot of work, and we're at the bottom of that hourglass where we've come up with some conclusions and implications. It would be important for you to understand whether you agree with them or not, or whether we missed anything. But we're right at that bottom of that hourglass, and if we get to some preliminary goal setting today, that would be great. I personally feel the hard work has been done, but if I was, I guess Steve Phillips or maybe on the staff, there's a lot of work that has to filter out before we have a final strategic plan. Next slide, Josh. So, what we're going to go through now, that's like the first opening thing is, well, actually, this is just, when you do an situation assessment, if it's done well, it says what's happening now, what caused that to happen, or what are the reasons because of that. It's fact-based versus opinion. And go ahead, click it again, Josh, I'm sorry. What are the conclusions and what are the implications? And then one more time, Josh. And for me, if this was done right, and I do teach at Salisbury, and I try to try to get the kids to make not just a bunch of data analysis, but what does this all mean? What's the so what? So it should almost tell you what your goal should be. It should be so crystal clear that you would say, obviously, we need to focus on this, and maybe what we have so far isn't quite there yet, but we'll be looking for your input. So, that's the key about a situation analysis, and I've been grilling my team why it was so important. We spent a lot of time. We probably spent 5 hours, 3 to 4 hours on the conclusions, implications on the board, just on that section, let alone the data. And then the next slide, I thought you guys would enjoy this. It's an Epidemic slide. It's a lot of data, but, and this is something I do use in my marketing research class. Without data, you're just another person with an opinion. So many times in my career, you have the CEO of a company that says, I think we should do this, and it's like, well, the data doesn't show that, it's the customers want this, they don't want that. So this is just a prelude to all the data we're going to go through. So bear with me. Josh, next slide. So we're going to go through this. We're going to start with category, and we looked at a couple other, and then I'm going to go through this quickly. It's going to be 20 to 30 minutes for you to ask questions for the board and for our committee. A lot of times it's the second time you're seeing this. So hopefully you have made some notes. If not, make some notes now. Just because there's so many people online, we can't stop at every slide and talk about it. So knowing that you've seen it once or twice, I'm going to go through it pretty quickly, and that's just my style, about 1 minute per slide. Well, we're going to start with category, then we're going to talk about the community, Ocean Pines, look at some financials, look at some other data that we have. And then a big portion of it, which it should be, is what do the property owners want? And then finally, we'll go over the 10 conclusions and implications. Make sense? Everybody good? This slide, for those of you seen it, is we started with 9 different benchmarks in looking at other communities. And we learned a lot, but in reality, I think my key takeaway was, other than the villages, Ocean Pines has more amenities than any place else that we found. We have more amenities. And the fact, the quality of the amenities or the uniqueness of them, the fact that we have beachfront, property. The fact that, again, I'm not a pickleball player, my wife is, but we probably have the biggest pickleball facility on the Eastern Shore. There's things that are, as Frank would say, competitive advantage, that we have, that in a business you want to leverage whatever you can. But that was but what we said was, after looking at 9, let's narrow it down to 3. It's a busy slide. It's probably one of my least favorite slides. Next slide, Josh. I'm too ahead of you already. Yeah, so this one was this, but this is the more important slide, where we looked at 3 different, we looked at Bayside, we looked at Sea Colony. We thought, they're kind of relatively close to us, relatively the same size, and we kind of compare and contrast what Ocean Pines is to both of those communities. And I think if I just, rather than going through, I try to highlight a couple. This is the busy slide that I talked about. There's probably too much here, but the conclusion was, we're not growing, and we probably don't have that much room to grow. Yeah, we got the steam development coming out, but I'm not sure that's many new houses. We sort of don't have the property to grow much further. We have a wide range of housing and amenities. One of the things that we noticed is Ocean Pines has personality. We have, from A to Z, from $200,000 condos to, $1.5 million houses, and a variety of houses. Where if you look at Bayside, and not to disrespect Bayside, but it really doesn't have a personality. They look very similar. You can almost say the same thing maybe about some other communities. But we felt like, we have a nice variety of housing. And then the other thing is A to Z. It's like, live in Ocean Pines, you never have to leave. We have the 55 plus, we have assisted living and all those things, and now even hospice. But it's a great community. The other thing we had is unique subsections, a lot of them with their own personalities and different things. And I personally felt we have more, in many cases, 2 HOA fees. So it's something maybe we don't think about when we're talking about our fees, is many people are paying, a separate HOA fee, a separate HOA condo fee. That we discussed this as a committee, and there are other communities that have this, but compared to Bayside and Sea Colony, even with Sea Colony, they have their condo fees plus their administration fees. But I know we get a lot of information, or a lot of people feel like amenities, we're spending too much on amenities. But in reality, if we look at the numbers, is compared to other similar communities that are close by, our fees are very fair for what you get. Probably too much time on that slide. Josh, next slide. We can jump to the community in Ocean Pines and the quantities. Next one. Like I said, we're going to go through this pretty quickly. This really just looks at, the whole point here is, and we're doing that now, and it was a question on the survey, should we do more to leverage our size? And while the community didn't really respond saying, yes, we should do that, we are the largest community in Worcester County. We should leverage that position. Whether it's doing more from a political standpoint, getting more for grants, but we should definitely leverage that strength that we have in Worcester County with our politicians and try to do more. The other part is, you know, we're slightly older than Worcester County, a little bit less diverse, with a little bit higher income and higher education, with a lower percent of renters. And if I was the board, we don't really narrow in on this percentage of renters, but the numbers are 11.5% in Ocean Pines rent, where in Worcester County it's 25%. Now you have Ocean City influencing that, things like that, but I know it comes up a lot about, you know, what's our rental policies and things like that. The question of the board is, do we want to keep it a non-rental community because that drives safety factors and other things potentially? Or, you know, do we want, does the community want the ability to rent more? So, I mean, that's a factor that we didn't wrestle with as a committee, but it looked at, you know, it's something that's going to come up over and over again over the next few years. Next slide, Josh. Safety. This is something we should be really proud of. And the committee knows I'm pretty passionate. You know, and basically it's communication. This was data, you know, it's done by SafeWise, you know, but when Berlin got the coolest small town, it was done by a magazine, you know, but they took on it pretty well and they are still the coolest small town, even though it was probably 3 or 4 years ago. So they leverage it. And I think since the community said safety is our #1 priority, and we are the safest community in Maryland, it's not necessarily a change in strategy, it's upping our communication. We had our town hall, one of the ideas that come up is in our weekly e-newsletter is just have a safety call, you know, have the chief of police, you know, give some tips about, you know, riding your bike on the parkway or whatever, on Ocean Gateway. But anyway, we should be proud of this. The key thing is, though, what's interesting is it's based on 2 factors: violent crime and property crime. So I guess if you wanted to maintain that, those are the 2 areas you'd focus on. I think we could take a broader look at safety and just become and continue that mantra of the safest community in Maryland. But it's awesome. I mean, the police and what's done here is just, we should be very proud of it. You know, this is an example of something that was very important and we do very well. So next slide, Josh. Probably not the best slide to show what John Viola and team have done, but I've been here 15 years and I've never seen anything like the last 3 years where we've delivered the financial performance. So kudos to John, kudos to the team for the work they've done. And, you know, just it's been phenomenal. So ideally you want to keep that up. There might be bumps in the road, but, you know, ideally that allows you to do other things like reduce amenity fees or invest in the community. Next slide, Josh. HOA assessment fees, bottom line is over the last year, 2 or 3, they're really not contributing that much to the assessment fee. In fact, they're break even and they're profitable. So I'm not saying we should change that. I think the committee was basically saying we need to educate the community that that's the case. You know, that our amenities are something that really can reduce their HOA fee or help to reduce it. And they need to be aware of it. I mentioned it before, but in business, if I was working at Hershey, I would say our brands a competitive advantage, like Reese and Hershey, and we can make a lot of money by selling those because they're very profitable. Where can you make money, or where can you help the community out in Ocean Pines? It's our amenities. There's other places. I have some ideas, but but in general, that's one of the biggest places, and it's an advantage that you have. Now, you want to make sure that your residents have access to those, and they're using them, and they're very happy with them. But amenities is one area that you could actually reduce. Keep your HOA fee competitive. Next slide, Josh.
So Ronnie, I just question. So it's hard for me to see, and I know I got to do something with the windows. But if you just go back to that slide, I want to make sure it's clear to me and everybody else by repeating it. So what I heard you say at the beginning, when I'm reading there on the bottom, is that assessment that we pay to our homeowners. How much of that, which includes, does that include that $4? Does that include the depreciation, or is that just the operational?
I wish Steve was here to answer that. Steve gave me the information, and I think it was just
Operational.
Operational. Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like just the operational, but we're moving towards basically, if we keep the way we're going with the amenities, to eventually come into that depreciation number. So that will get better, but you're right. A big part of that, everybody has this mindset that, they're paying all this money in assessment for golf, or pick another amenity. I'm just picking that one. It's paying for itself. I don't know, whatever happened 15 years ago, that's a different story. But, I'm glad you're highlighting that there for everybody. It really isn't that much. If I was to take an example, there's not one leaf that Ocean Pines picks up from my house, or many, many houses, but yet we pay $20 on the assessment. To take care of leaves, and I can go on and on with that. That's what is the beauty of this place, is that there's a balance in everything, but it's just amazing how you focus on it. It's probably one of the best gems. So that's what I'm going to say there, but I'm glad you have a slide like that.
I think our message, and thanks for picking up, John, our message is we need to communicate this more. We need, and people say, well, we have. Well, you need to communicate. You need to really just talk all the time. Here's what I'll use racket facility, small usage, but high profitability. Here's what the racket facility contributed. Here's what they've done. Here's how much money they raised. I know it gets in the local paper when we do things, but being in marketing all my career, I know how hard it is to break through and to get the message across. So it's more of a messaging, and keep the same thing up going forward. Jump ahead 1 or 2 slides, Josh, please. Some background. Go ahead, next slide. Just to make it clear, a lot of words on this slide that I want to say. So I guess if you look at the middle, when we did this survey, and it was a little bit different, a little different than the last survey, where all the questions, or at least most of them, were balanced. Where you can look at them and say, 1 is typically negative, like not satisfied, or 5 is extremely satisfied. In the middle, they're either slightly satisfied or neutral. So the important thing is it's balanced. I think the survey that was done 3 or 4 years ago had a lot of other comments, a lot of open-ended comments, hard to analyze, and really make some conclusions. They did a great job, and actually in this deck at the very end in the appendix, I have their top 8 conclusions. I wanted to just, it's important to look at, we looked at it 2 different ways. We looked at, go to the next slide, Josh. Really is hard to see. I'm colorblind, by the way. Except red, green, and yellow, I can see stoplights. So importantly, we looked at average scores, and so if something was rated a 4.0, that would mean that they were very satisfied with that amenity or whatever we talked about. If they said it was 2.0, they were slightly unsatisfied. So we looked at average scores, and 1,832 people. That's a really good representation. But the second thing is degree of positivity. And you'll see this, on national polls, where they're talking about, say, the current president or the past president's favorability. They will show, I call it top 2 box. So either very or extremely satisfied. And that's a number to look at. I personally feel it should be 60%. For example, when I was in all the companies I worked at, you had benchmarks. But your top 2 box should be around 60% to make it. So 60% of your residents, or 60% of the people who took the survey were either very or extremely satisfied. So just keep that in mind, the 60%. And then at the bottom, I just said, and it was one of the biggest surprises to me, we'll show some demographic data. But I know in the past, and really going into this, we thought we'd see significant differences in full-time and part-time people, younger people, with children, older people that are retired. Surprisingly, on the key takeaways, we didn't see that much of a difference. That was my personal biggest surprise. I thought part-timers would want a whole different thing than full-timers. I just thought they'd have different needs, but as it turns out, I was surprised that we found that much. And just a final comment on the survey, 1,832. Most national polls, when you see them, political polls are 1,000, which, we did 1,800 within Ocean Pines. So that's a pretty good response rate, very engaged community. Okay, enough for the background. Josh, next slide. So we're going to get into the property owner survey. We're doing pretty good on time. You've seen this 2 or 3 times, so we'll go through it pretty quickly. I think on the right-hand side, 95% of the people were either slightly, very, or extremely satisfied. That's a really good number. And what did I say? You want to be above 60%, okay? 68.5% were either very or extremely satisfied. Very good numbers. Slight difference here, no significance, but part-timers seem to be a little bit happier, okay? I guess they're on vacation all the time, we're here full-time. And then, interesting enough, the younger, 59.5. So, I mean, it's just, I try to be very strict with how I set up, what we're going to put in one box, but that's still very positive. But Ocean Pines residents are really happy. And then the same thing, we just asked the question, which is often asked. I think I got 2 or 3 emails with this yesterday. Would you recommend this company? Would you recommend Ocean Pines to a friend or colleague? And 83% total number said yes. Some of the numbers on here, again, the younger was a little bit less, part-timers were a little bit higher, but no significant difference there. So in general, it's a really good number to look at and a really good benchmark for us to look at going forward. I use the example of, there's no HOA benchmark. So is 83 a good number? I don't know, because I couldn't find any other HOAs that have done this. I do know, like in the insurance industry, 60% is a good number if you're happy with insurance, but nobody's happy with insurance, I guess. But even with auto industry, I know it's around 60, 65%. If you get that, you're pretty good. But it's a benchmark, and it just says, they're very satisfied and they recommend Ocean Pines to others. Now, there are a minority that aren't happy, but I think you're going to have that everywhere. Josh, next slide. I color-coded these, and we're going back and forth whether we should color-code it. But a sea of green. When we asked people what was most important, safety was number 1, maintenance of infrastructure was number 2, community appearance was number 3. Again, average scores all above 4. And then,
Which one?
remember the 60% number? Look at the numbers here. 95% were either very or extremely important. So really passionate about, really good scores here. Sea of green, things that, assessment fee value for the money. The way if I was at Hershey and asked, do you think the price of a Hershey bar is fair? Nobody's gonna, or the price of do you think Hershey should increase the price of a Hershey bar? Nobody's gonna say yes. So when you ask, it's a difficult question to say, how do you feel about, what you're paying for something, because nobody's going to say they want to pay more. I think when we get to the satisfaction, it's a pretty good number. They're pretty happy. but we'll talk about that. And then finally, we didn't talk about this a lot, but we asked a broad-based overall Ocean Pines customer service. Now, this was at the time that we had a lot of issues this past summer. I think John and team have implemented the 800 number and that around the same time. But it was something we don't talk a lot about or haven't talked a lot about because it was fifth and we're doing okay with that. I think the improvements we made, but it was something. And what does that mean? I'm not even sure because we didn't, that's all we stated. We didn't really define what overall customer services. We let the property owners define what that might be, but it did come up as something that's extremely important. Josh, next one. Again, in color coding it, what really stood out, this is a satisfaction score. So on the left-hand side, where the numbers we just looked at, importance, in the middle is how satisfied are you. Very satisfied would be a 4, so 3.83, pretty high in safety. Community appearance, pretty high. I threw some numbers in there. It looks like safety is very close to that safety number. The point on this slide is there's probably some things that we could do on all these. But in order to prioritize, Josh, go to the next slide. And skip again. I threw an extra slide in there. One more. Yeah. To me, if you had to pick between the 5, you would say, the 3 that stood out were maintenance of infrastructure. I mean, we're a 50-year-old community, 50 plus. Of course, we need to invest in infrastructure. Community appearance and aesthetics, and assessment fee value for the money. People want, with the current status, the age of our, fixed incomes, a lot of different things, that is important and it should be important. And kudos to the board for some recent actions on this. And then Ocean Pines overall customer service. So the 3 in the middle there, I thought, we thought as a committee were the 3 that should be focused on. But there's probably some things that we could do in communication of safety to increase that number. Maybe with customer service, just continue to report out how we're doing in that area and take some actions there. So this is one of the biggest things where we looked at what was important, how are we doing, what is the biggest gap, and this is what we came up with. So I mentioned one of my other surprises was there was no difference of part-timers versus full-timers, and all that data is in the back of this deck, which will be posted. Another thing, I was a little surprised about community appearance and aesthetics. Just personally, I didn't think that would come up, as a gap there. So I think we've done a pretty good job, but maybe at the time, the Northgate Bridge, I'm not sure what was influencing that. It came up as something that we need to work on. And I knew we do a lot of work in that area. Okay, Josh, culture and values. See you green. John.
You okay with questions?
Yeah, we're giving us time.
Can you just go back a slide, please? Okay, first of all, this is all great stuff. I'm sitting here and I see the numbers and I hear good stuff, the 80% approval rating. I'm looking at maintenance of infrastructure, I see 2.83. Obviously, I'm focused on that. Here's my take on this, just sitting here, and granted, I haven't been in all the meetings, but it's this. There seems to be a gap or a perception of what's going on here. Probably in the last 3 years, we've done more for the infrastructure, credit to everybody. This building alone is an attestment to it. The police station, I saw what everything was before. I see what it is now. I see where it's going. But here, there could be a gap or a time gap in what people have for 20 years and see policies by the board or some type of management or whatever. For whatever reasons, and not blaming anybody. But certainly when I look at that, and I agree that's a top item for me. But this survey, I understand why, at least my opinion, I'm trying to analyze it, is that it's taking time. And it's all this perception of everything people have seen and read over the last 15, 20 years, where this place, basically everything, was deteriorating because of a policy or management or whatever. Which was basically run it into the ground, don't put any money in it, and just keep that assessment low. We could take 30,000, 40,000 out of the budget for maintenance for the golf course. And somebody's pounding their chest in the board meeting saying, I just lowered your assessment or even. But then who's going to play that golf course? Maintenance doesn't have the equipment to maintain it. They don't have the money to cut the rough. So now your golf course, a gem for all of us, regardless if you play or not, is something you can't sell. I can't sell, anybody can't sell. And then it's, look what happens. So then you get proactive and you invest, you get the equipment, yeah, you're putting some money in, but you're investing $5 and you make just a simple example, but you're making 10 as opposed to cutting $3 and losing 7. And that's what's going on. I'm not blaming anybody. That's a mindset. It's changed, and I hope, as a homeowner, I really hope we continue that way going forward. You know, and I'm not saying go out and spend all kinds of crazy money, but everything we've done has been benchmarked and has been reviewed. I mean, this building, $1.4 million. I'm looking at houses in Torrance at 1.2. And it's not sure, now granted, this was done before whatever the time, but we are moving in that direction. But I think you're right, Bernie, something I heard you say many times, you know, obviously I have to, the GM has to do it. I think a lot of this stuff has to be communicated more at all levels. I don't know if you want
Got Doug raising his hand. Doug Parks is raising his hand.
John, thanks for speaking up. I wrote down communication about amenities.
to. Yeah, right.
And communication about infrastructure, what we're doing. And you could say we're doing it, but it's just hard to break through that clutter. You just need to constantly do that. Doug?
Bernie, can I make a comment also about the community appearance and aesthetics? The Ocean Palms owned property has received a lot of attention and you know, thanks to John and his team on aesthetics and appearance improvements. I think when you go through your slides, you're going to get to one that talks about enforcement of our DRs being important. And that relates to the homeowner's responsibility. And a lot of the complaints, if you come to the meetings every month, a lot of the complaints we get have to do with appearance type issues. And I think this is another communication opportunity to communicate to the homeowners the role that they play personally in maintaining their properties and maintaining the aesthetics of their properties. A few years ago, there was talk about, a couple of years ago, there was talk about fines for DR violations, and that didn't get a lot of traction. You know, I'm not sure that's a direction we want to go, but maybe the communication and of, you know, kind of pride of ownership campaigns, something like that would really, is something that we really should be considering to convey to both full-time and part-time owners the role that they personally play in the community appearance and the aesthetics.
Yeah, I've got a comment.
I have a comment too.
With regard to these 3 items in red, it would be a valid assumption that those 3 items are going to be an influencer on the creation of a strategic plan, and if so, I guess my expectation would be to get a better understanding of what kinds of things that led to the gap that you've noted here. In other words, more specific information regarding to someone, you know, like to Colette's point that, you know, what drove somebody to have such a somewhat negative, you know, approach to community appearance. You know, in other words, I'd really want to know some of the more detailed information, so we make sure that if these indeed are some things that are going to drive strategic plan, that we're addressing the right items.
Great point, and I completely agree. And we could dive deeper with additional questions, surveys, you know, list of list 8 options within infrastructure. What's most important to you? So we could actually fine tune the direction that we give going forward as an option. And we do have people taking notes. We will recap this meeting. So I actually like this better than waiting to break. Where you're getting people while you're thinking of the topic. I'm going to take anybody else online before Larry. Larry.
Yeah, listen, John's absolutely right. You know, there's been a group of people here in Ocean Pines for 30 years that their main concern was keeping the assessments down. They didn't care what happened to the appearance of this community or the maintenance on the infrastructure or the golf course or the parks. The sole focus down here was to keep the assessments down. If you look at the history of our assessments, you'll see that the number stayed the same for probably 10 years at one point because there was a loud group of people that did not want a dime spent on anything. Over the last 5 years, that has changed somewhat. And particularly over the last 3 years, John's absolutely right. We've invested in infrastructure. We've invested in the appearance of this community. And Colette's also right that the homeowners are responsible for their property. But if you look around the community, when you drive around and you notice that there's so much work going on these 50-year-old homes and remodeling, re-landscaping, you know, clearing some of the properties out. I know that's another area where we have a few people screaming about trees being taken down. Things have changed. And just look at just a couple of examples. Look at the boardwalk work that was done over at Wood Duck. It was done at the entrances. Look at the teal painting done at Teal Bay. Things like that. You still have a few people. You know, I was saying to my wife, when you have people focusing on the appearance of the guard shack at the Northgate Bridge, we must be doing something right because that has never been an issue before. And now the complainers have something to complain about. We've gotten down to that granular level of complaint. We're doing something right. So I think, you know, can more be done? Yes. Does Public Works need to probably do a little more? Yes, but we've got constraints there too. The bottom line is, I think, where we need to head here is some kind of communication plan to let people know exactly what has occurred.
I agree, and I'll get to your point. And this is really good. This is what we wanted. My biggest concern was, yeah, the data's good. Yeah, move on. We're good. You know, so I appreciate the comments and passion. I walked in today, you know, and I'm thinking, what a beautiful building. What beautiful landscape. It's so great. The setup of this room and everything. I thought, wow, how different is that from 5 years ago when the upstairs wasn't even open, I don't think, for a long time, and it was dark and dingy and whatever. And the same thing about the yacht club. So, I mean, I think to me, this gives you permission to even invest more. These things are the ones that drove the satisfaction. They were the most important to people. These are your satisfaction goals. And John, to your point, community appearance and aesthetics, I just picked that one, 3.16. They're slightly satisfied, okay? It's not like they're dissatisfied. As a committee, we were trying to just get, what are the gaps between these two? And where are the biggest gaps? I guess, you know, if I was on the board, I'd say, yeah, it makes sense. Infrastructure, of course. Well, this gives you that permission going forward to even, you know, enforce more or do more. But I do agree, it's a communication issue too. There's two sides to it. I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
I'm not so excited. In this information, I'm already communicating with Josh that we're going to utilize a lot of this going forward. But I just want to take a step back too. We're not going to change the slides, but before, and I understand when you said, well, it's 80% or it's 4.63. really didn't have anything to benchmark that against, and I get that, and it makes sense, because I've heard all the, we're a homeowners association, we're a municipality, whatever, so I get that. My question to you and your committee, or even as I sit here, I look at it and then I say, okay, where are my KPIs on that? How else can I measure that? In several ways. One, the amenities get packed. Golf now, unlike 3, 4, 5 years ago, the place is packed. The yacht club is packed. Pickleball, those racket sports down there, packed. I could go on and on. This grill is moving up. So to me, something that obviously is working. The amenities are operationally profitable, operationally. I could go on with other stuff. Larry touched on people improving their homes. I was talking before about the value of homes. The fact that you can't even find a home for sale. Obviously, it's moving in the right direction. Now, granted, for the sale of homes, that's everywhere. It's not a lot, but we're certainly getting our share here. So to me, I'm looking at different ways to measure it each day. And I'm just wondering, this committee and everything, did you look at KPIs, or you're looking at measurements outside of, and I get where you can't find something out there just like us. So then what are you doing? What do you need?
Bernie, let me make one more point. And I don't want to sound like we're defending what has gone on here, and in essence we are, but the importance of this is that, okay, we as a board and John with his team, we know what has been done. The importance of this is that the perception of the community thinks otherwise. So this is valid. It's not that it's not valid. So the only issue is, how do we address it? And I think that's where we got to get to.
Yeah, I certainly have a big takeaway from this on the communication, Bernie. I appreciate that. And Josh and I already, we have somebody like Josh, so we have a strong person on this.
Yeah, you definitely have a strong person on the team. Now, what I didn't talk about in this is the 10 other things that we asked about how Ocean Pines is doing. Communications was off the charts. With what Josh has done, as far as social media, as far as YouTube and all that, we're happy with, how things are being communicated outward from Ocean Pines. But it's not an area of,
There's certain pieces here we have to focus on.
within the communications going forward.
Have your study, right? And we'll jump on it.
Yeah. And again, this is 5 years, this is something that you set a framework, and we will set as a team KPIs for all this stuff. Okay, move on. Great discussion. Values. Sea of green. We just threw this out there. Helen did a lot of great work on this, looking at other communities. Berlin has established values, core values. We're not going to get into how to implement these or what we recommend, but I did use all the different demographics we looked at, and it was really strong across the board as far as average scores and top 2 boxes. The one yellow mark down there, which was, in the middle, it was interesting. Enforcement of regs by younger. Did I say that was significant? That is significantly different than the rest of the scores for whatever reason. I don't know, just a no, nothing to do with that. Other than there was support to implement. This basically says the same thing. It just, it basically looks at it a different way. Next slide, Josh. Skip ahead too. Yeah, I had a duplicate slide in there. So going into issues and opportunities. I think what I tried to do is, again, a lot of this work was done by the executive council. Remember, Larry, you headed up a meeting with the SWAT that says, what are opportunities? What are issues? So we use that information to inform our survey. So traffic on 589, I've seen it grow since I've been here. It's a concern. What can we do? Well, just make sure that, we let, our political representatives know that our Ocean Pines are very concerned about this. I'm not sure what else we could do. But then there's other things, I support the use of electronic voting, and that was a pretty strong number. And if you think of 97% of the survey was completed online, I mean, our residents, they might be slightly older, but they're pretty savvy when it comes to, they're online, they have Wi-Fi, and they're pretty strong in that area. But, you know, I looked at it as a cost saving, maybe it's a customer satisfaction issue. But I know, and I know we're working on reducing the cost of, you know, with the scanners and everything else, but I'd like to see us get to that point at some point. That's my personal opinion. And then premium pay for non-residents use. Of course, when you ask somebody, should other people pay more? They're going to say yes. So you have to take that with a caveat. We should invest in improving current amenities. We'll get into that in a minute. There was higher support than that for investing in new amenities and increased enforcement of covenants and regulations. I know there's legal costs, there's other issues there, but there was, you know, 3.6, average that, it rounded up to 4, but it wasn't like it was a 5. It was a little bit below 60% there, but it's still pretty strong support for an increased enforcement of covenants and regulations. Next slide. I tried to say within, you know, opportunities, and I guess some were issues, but from an opportunity standpoint, how can we make money, or is there an opportunity to bring more income in rather than just trying to reduce cost or whatever? I thought, well, first one would be reducing cost potentially, electronically, charging residents more, and the board, and they're all doing that, increase in fees this year. You have to balance that. You might price yourself out of the market. So you have to be careful with that. See whether participation continues, we'll see what the non-residents feel about that. But in general, it is an opportunity to bring in income to help the community.
Bernie, just a comment on that I think that's also a communication opportunity, because we do get complaints about the cost and that differential between resident and non-resident. And I think we need to do a better job of communicating how we benchmark our fees for outsiders and insiders. Because I think, you know, my impression is that the public doesn't realize that we're actually doing that. And that our member user rates are pretty competitive. Maybe there's more room to increase the outside costs, but that's something I think could better be communicated.
I have a question too. Are you, unless I misheard you, are you saying that these are the areas that you were looking at to increase income or reduce expense?
When you look at, we combined it on the survey, you know, rank these issues and opportunities. Some were more negative or might cost money, like infrastructure. Other ones, I try to separate them and say, these are opportunities to either reduce costs or potentially add income.
And I thought that's what you said. And I would have to tell you that this increased enforcement of covenants and regulation to increase fees, I think is really, I mean, I understand the logic behind it, but it really puts, you know, the board has to balance the cost of enforcement. And, you know, we don't want to turn this into a Gestapo state where, you know, I've heard a lot about Colombia, where if you're, you know, anything goes wrong, next thing you know, you got a fine on your hands. I don't think that's the type of community at least I know it's not the type of community I want. And so it would be difficult for me to support that type of proposition to increase fees to raise money for the association. I just think it's a bad idea. So.
Yeah, and I think that's why I felt that we should focus on communication of homeowner responsibility and a campaign of pride of ownership, something like that, a more positive approach.
Larry, I think if you just looked at those values numbers, sea green, all high, we should implement some type of core values. This one here, if I looked at this, the only number above 60% is the electronic voting.
Yeah.
So figure out how to do that and do that well. If all the other ones were up in the 4s and they're 80%, I would say I disagree with you, Larry, but I don't disagree with what you're saying. And I understand the costs. So you have to pick and choose, what you're going to focus on. And I don't understand all the inner workings. I do know it's really costly to enforce it, and I wouldn't want it to be a Gestapo either. It's a balance. Josh, go to amenities, and there's really, this will support some of the things that we were talking about earlier. I just tried to separate it, and, I separated to one question. We asked the question, should we invest in current amenities? Should we invest in new amenities? The question specifically is rate your level of agreement with the following. So completely disagree, too strongly agree. 3.62, you can average that to a 4, but it was higher than a half a point higher than investing in new amenities. So there was directionally more support for just investing in new amenities. And if you look at the right-hand scores on the right, you were pretty close to 60%. That 60% number that I was looking at compared to only 35% or 36% saying that they should invest. This isn't as clear cut, but if I would, I would not want to go and spend $1 million on a new amenity, because we have a lot. Over the next couple of years, I don't think we should be focusing on new amenities. Not that this is hugely different, but there was some indication that that's what the homeowners want.
So when I'm reading this and I see the first one there, it says improving current amenities. So there is, in my mind, and I just want to make sure I'm right, that's different than maintaining a current amenity. So it's only slightly agreed to improve them. What we really didn't ask for, I'm not seeing it up there, is where does everybody feel about maintaining current amenities? Is that like 90% or did we even ask?
We didn't ask that. And so an investment in the golf club, is that infrastructure or is that, or let me just, a different example. Let's just say the beach club. Is that an investment? And I don't know this, I'm just throwing it out there. Is that an infrastructure investment or is that an amenity investment? I don't know.
So mechanically, do you want me to, I'm sorry, do you want?
Yeah, I mean, this is open discussion.
So to me, I can break it down into 2 items with that, just thinking quickly. If I'm investing in, if we're investing in that building, that's infrastructure.
Yeah.
The byproduct of that, or what comes out of that, obviously, what I was talking about before with this example of the golf course, it's going to have a favorable, it should have a favorable operational impact. If it doesn't, then I have a different situation. But certainly every time we do that, we invest in infrastructure, it should have a positive byproduct on operations. If not, then I got other problems. So I break it down into 2 pieces there. So initially it's infrastructure. But I can see where somebody would approach it and say, well, that's operational. To me, the operations from that should be positive and, or a byproduct. That's just me.
I mean, to me, it's new pickleball courts, since they have a good ROI.
I'm sorry, so if I invest and I have, higher management down there, or I put in more people for customer service or something, to me, that would be more operational, just thinking quick. As I'm trying to break it down for what you're asking. Because there could be some investment that's operational. There's some, most of it in my mind right now is infrastructure, hopefully operation. That's my answer. So the committee think? What's the committee think?
Pardon me?
What's the committee think? What does everybody else think about it?
Hey, Barney,
Yes.
my impression was that the term improving current also incorporated maintaining.
Okay.
I think those 2 words were interchangeable in the way people that took the survey perceived the question. So
I take it differently, but maybe I'm just. Okay.
Do me a favor, ask that same question after the next couple slides.
Sure, whatever you want me to.
Yeah. Because when we looked at amenities, then we said, because we actually said new amenities or services. So that was the more detailed, the way the question was asked. Specifically was rate your interest in the following possible new and or improved amenities or services. One being not interested at all, five being extremely interested. There's no green on here at all, okay? It's kind of like, Josh, next slide, sorry. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, slightly interested in improved walking and bike paths. On the other hand, if I looked at how big our community is and how many miles of bike paths we have versus other communities, I support improved walking and bike paths. It's not a lot of money. It seems like people wanted that more than anything. You're not spending $1 million. Et cetera. Fitness center is another one that comes up because a lot of other facilities, and especially when they're building new communities, they're including a fitness center. It was, don't build a fitness center. Maybe add more things, more fitness opportunities within the facilities we have, but you don't need to invest in a fitness center. Improved street lighting was, again, it was in this box of, do you need it? I know we hear a lot about that. It's kind of neutral, it wasn't off the charts. And then one of the other ones, updated beach club, again, we even asked that in there. So, I mean, to me, as you said, John, it's probably infrastructure, but, people didn't, they were kind of almost negative on that. But I would argue that's an infrastructure investment. Improve disability access to amenities. So to me, it's something we have to do, even though the community maybe didn't necessarily say that should be a top priority. So some things you want to do that maybe legally or morally are required. It's the right thing to do versus a community thing. This isn't really, maybe it's not fair, but I guess I speak for myself, is I have an eye issue where I don't do well at night driving, and is there a little bit of street lighting that we can do in certain sections? I think one of our committee members even mentioned, could you do it, energy free or something like that, just to improve a little bit. I'm not proposing street lighting based on this, but would they be considered safety or improved walking and bike paths? The conclusion of this slide is we asked whether new amenities were important. The answer was no. New amenities or services, when we looked and had them rank amenities and services, it was neutral. It was kind of like lukewarm. Nobody stood out and said, this is what we need to do. At the best, they were slightly interested. Let me see if I have one more. And that's what I just wanted to say as far as, what we came up with so far. John?
So, and again, that word, can you just go back to that price slide? Thanks, Josh. So, before updated beach club. Again, when I talked about, maybe somebody asked me to wait a little bit about maintain or improve. I think about the beach club, truly a gem like everything here. I don't necessarily take that as a negative. As I sit here and being here 15 years, I can also read into that possibly they don't want us to build a Taj Mahal there.
Yeah.
That we have such a gem there, just maintain it. It's beautiful. So that's how I read that. That's me.
I think you also have to understand that such a small percentage of the people use the amenities.
Wes Blake's like.
Wes.
And so that skews those numbers, I think.
I'm sorry, did you say a small percentage of the people use the amenities?
He was saying beach club, maybe. That could impact the number. I think he was saying overall, maybe this was 18.
What do you have to support that? I find that statement incredible. Because
it came out of the survey.
We'll show you the thing. We'll show you claimed usage. I'm not sure if beach club's in there, but we'll show you some of that in a second. But Wes, thanks for speaking up. I tried to compare satisfaction. So if you look at where we made big investments, golf club and the yacht club, was the satisfaction higher? And unfortunately, I couldn't make that conclusion. You would think hypothetically it would, but the numbers, there just wasn't enough numbers there to look at.
I just, I hope I'm right on that. The other thing, Bernie, on a lot of the stuff is what's not up there, and it's usually not in these type of situations, is a lot of times, if not everything, and I don't want to say everything, but everything's a function to some degree, we put that in there, function of money, cost.
Yeah.
So obviously, and I'm used to majority of that stuff up there, but, depending on the cost, I'd be open to it as a homeowner. I'm not talking as a homeowner. Sure, it'd be great to have street lighting. At what cost? And do we need it? Obviously, some feel we do, but, at what cost? That function of cost really, I don't think comes into play or was even asked in the survey.
What was the specific, what was that?
I think the question is, okay, so, what percentage wants, let's say, street lighting or whatever, but at what cost? That function really isn't in there.
Beach club. What I would say is that if you're going to spend $1 million or $2 million on the beach club, you need a communication campaign while you're doing it.
Right.
That's what this tells me, because part of it is you probably have to maintain your infrastructure. Other things, the thing's going to fall down. There's opportunities to maybe make more money, with wedding, whatever, but it could be just a heads up. If you're going to invest, it's going to need a communication campaign of why you're investing.
Communication again, right.
Let me make one more point here too, when we're talking about the amenities. We could have this, this building could be, if it could be 3 times the size, or the yacht club was 3 times the size, but it wasn't run properly, it would, it wouldn't matter. You could have a really nice facility, but the operational part of it is key. Matt Ord companies are doing a great job making that yacht club the hot spot that it is. And having this golf course, and we've seen, I've been down here for over 40 years, and I've seen a golf course when people decide to save money and they pull the money out of the golf course, it goes to crap. And then the income on the golf course goes way down. And then, the cycle begins. Well, let's shut it down. We're losing so much money. So a lot of this is a function of today where we are in this community. Just about everything is relatively new. The swim and racket club had been updated, and the beach club has been getting updated every year. But besides that, everything else is pretty much new. And so now it becomes a function of operations, in my opinion.
Right. There's a sweet spot.
Right.
We've used the word balance, but there's a sweet spot with analysis and everything of how much do you spend, how much management do you have, how much staff, what do you charge? Now, keep in mind that our amenities, my office and everything, they are amenities. Built into that price is kind of some favorability to the people or the residents of Ocean Pines. So obviously, you're operational, maybe you make a little less. You're trying to make it an amenity. You do that with food and beverage. Ralph certainly does it. We do it with golf. Our prices for the homeowners, same thing with racket sports and aquatics. So that's built in when you say, how much do we pay for the amenities? We are, it's an amenity also, so.
Yeah, on the operational side, I completely agree. I tell this story about, I pulled up on my boat to the yacht club about 5 years ago, and I went up and I said, hey, I'd like about, 6 appetizers, take on the boat, how long will it take? Norman says, I have no idea. I have no control over the kitchen. So it's a lot different today. So, it definitely is a significant improvement.
I'm going to make a comment and have Becky waiting also.
Oh, I'm sorry, Becky. Go
Now,
ahead.
the comment that I'm going to make goes back to what you said earlier about the KPIs. I think that has to be a key factor and consideration for this strategic plan. We need to identify what are those that relate to the most high priority items that we're going to be focusing on.
Becky?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Becky Ferguson. I am a member of the strategic committee. There's a lot of feedback. Can you hear that?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, can somebody hit the mute button while she's talking?
Yeah, Josh, where's the mute button?
I got it.
Okay.
Yeah, is it better? A little bit.
We can hear you fine.
Okay, someone
That's not
someone mentioned that they were surprised about the lack of usage by Ocean Pines ownership entities. According to the survey, 68.49% of people who answered the survey had not used the buffer. I'm interestingly a Clubhouse Grill. 55.95% of the people who answered the survey had not used the Clubhouse Grill. Interestingly, 68.62% of the people who answered the survey had not used the indoor pool. 48.4% of the people who answered the survey had not used the beach club. So what I appreciate in some of the data that we have gathered, I see that there's differences in the residents' understanding of where their money's going. There's differences in the usage of our amenities within the community. There's differences in the lack of information on what it takes to run an amenity operationally. I've noticed some terms this morning that I'm not familiar with, KPI and other terms that individuals are using that perhaps other residents don't understand what those terms mean. So I do think collectively we've identified that there's a big need for communication, but as we use that term, we also have to think, what does that communication include? And there needs to be a lot of education among the individuals in the community in order for them to really understand this data and what it means to them. And we're all in this together. You know, it's residents, board, and everyone, because we're all members of the community. So as we seek to improve the community, we all have to get on that same level of understanding. But there's a great deal of residents here who do not use our amenities. And we have to maintain a competitive edge in a resort-like community when we are running a residential community. And that's going to be a challenge going forward, no matter whether we're running it well or whether we're not running it well, or we're choosing to spend our money in XYZ or analyzing what's coming back. We have an inflationary time where we're going to be making decisions in a post-pandemic situation where a lot of people have been affected in a lot of different ways. So as we look at some of these ideas, we're going to have to come out of the box, and we're going to have to look at, if we want to look at street lighting, we might not do it from the traditional standpoint of running electric lines. We might have to look at some alternative energy sources in strategic points around the community. So that's just my thoughts as I'm listening.
Need to unmute the room. Got it.
I have to unmute it, right?
Colette already did. If you hit it again, you're going to mute it again.
Okay.
Okay, to what Becky was saying, that the large percentage don't use the amenities, I think that speaks to OPA not being like the other all-inclusive communities that you benchmarked, that included golf and included everything, but had a higher HOA fee, a significantly higher fee. And I think that speaks to the fact that our community likes picking and choosing what they join and what they don't join, and they don't want it to be like other communities that have that high fee, and you might be forced to join the pool or join the golf, and you don't want it. So I think that is very important when we're planning 5 years out, that we don't change our model.
And to build on that, I think Becky's point really needs to get highlighted, because the decisions we're going to make, a lot of this, some of it is town management stuff, the infrastructure and so forth. And then there is the amenity focus. There's the safety focus. Some of these are more residential community issues. Some of them are more resort community issues. And I think we need to not assume that the ranking and the ratings equate those, but they are equally important.
Oh, good. Again, to conclude this slide, the, new amenities didn't really jump off the chart. When we asked about specific amenities, we included beach shop because the two benchmark, offered that, the two communities we benchmarked, Sea Colony and Bay, what is it? Anyway, offered a beach shop. Nobody was interested in that. In fact, lower score. So it's, unless I see a sea of green, I wouldn't go crazy on making any significant changes without doing a lot of work. Are we good? Do we want to take a break or keep going?
I think we're good.
Again, if anybody wants a cup of coffee, I did, it's on me. Becky, let's move forward. I wanted to make the comment, I wish Dawn was here, that think of us as a consultant, that you hired to kind of work on this and drive the process. I don't have expertise. I don't know what, I never read our bylaws. I don't understand the operational aspects of things. But what this does is basically say, based on our work, I do have experience in strategic planning and property owner insights, but I'm still, I can still learn a lot, but just keep it as, this is what we've learned, do you agree with it or not? So the conclusion here was, when we looked at amenities, the conclusion was those that use amenities are very satisfied with the amenities they use. Let's move on, Josh. Next slide. These are listed in order of claimed usage. Now, importantly, when I did talk to SurveyMonkey, because as you get into it, the numbers get smaller. Everything you've seen so far had 1,832 responses. So 1,832. As you get into, if you use the amenities in the past 6 months, how would you rate them? There's people question, why do we say that? Well, hopefully that's a recent, experience. So importantly, what they told me at SurveyMonkey is these aren't as projectable as your total numbers because your population is getting smaller. But interesting enough, 82% yacht club was the highest claim usage. If we would have did this 5 years ago, I wondered what that number would have been, but we don't know that. Farmers market, so these are claim usage. I can't say it's 100%. This is completely accurate, but this is what the claim usage out of those people that took the survey said. 80% farmers market, that stood out. That's pretty impressive. And then you get down to parks, walking trails, outdoor pools. Sea of green on the average scores. Yacht club, farmers market, extremely satisfied on the top 2 boxes. Outdoor pools, extremely satisfied. And this comes into, this would be an argument on walking trails, where maybe it wasn't a high priority for new amenities. People aren't as satisfied with walking trails. It's a pretty high usage, claimed usage, and maybe there's opportunities to just do a little bit more in that area. So that's an example of that. Next one. I guess the big question here, does anybody use the dog park? What is the issue with the dog park? Because it's the only one that had a 3 rating and only 29% top 2 box. So lowest usage and maybe some of the lower scores. I don't know why, and I'm a dog lover, but it probably shouldn't be a priority, but maybe somebody wants to look into that. Racket sports, second lowest percent usage, but boy, again, really high percentage there. I guess the 59.5 should have been coded yellow. Didn't quite get to 60, but again, the message here is people that use or claim to use it are pretty high. Becky was quoting some numbers from these charts. John, the comment I made was these are claimed usages. According to SurveyMonkey, they're not projectable. So you're probably in a better position to measure what the actual usage is, if not today, someday. But these are the claimed usages. People that use the amenities are extremely happy. What surprised me was farmers market was that high up and extremely satisfied. Yacht club, what I said was, I wonder what that would have been if we asked it 5 or 7 years ago.
Right.
I know I stopped using it after a while. It wasn't even in my radar to consider, even though it was so convenient to use.
Can you just go back one, please? If I can comment. So you're saying, on this one, I can pretty much read, you're saying these are the least used amenities or whatever, right?
Yes.
Okay, so, but in the right, but there again, you have a marina that has 90 slips. I mean, you're not going to have thousands of people utilizing it.
Yeah.
The same thing with the boat ramps. I'm kind of surprised about the golf course. I would disagree on that, especially what I've seen over the last 2 years, 3 years. And the dog park also. I mean, it's just naturally going to fall into that. So.
These are claimed usage. These are not projectable. These are not saying that 31% of people, based on the people that took the survey, 31% of those people use the golf course.
Right, and then, okay, so
of the 1,800.
If you look at that number on the golf course and understand there's 1,800 people took this survey, and we've got 4,800 people, or 8,452 people, that number probably projects to the 1,800 number that we looked into, you know, of people in the community that actually use it.
Right, so 1,800, so they're saying they feel that's.
So that's,
a low number.
but it's only based on 1,800 people taking the survey.
Right.
We've got 8,452 people, homes.
Because the marina is used at 100%. I mean, racket sports is packed. So I'm not really sure outside of it.
What we did here, John, is up until this point, there was 1,832 responses. Now the question was, if you use these amenities in the past 6 months, how would you rate that amenity? The overall conclusion was anybody that uses any amenity loves it, okay? Except for maybe dog park, and I have no idea, and I don't really care.
Right.
No, I mean, I'm a dog lover. I just.
I get it. But who loves the dog park?
Whoever
I
uses
don't.
it
I
should
would
let
never
us
take
know
my
what the
dog
issues
there.
are. Maybe there's something, and actually it's still not bad. It's slightly satisfied. I mean, it's.
Okay, so now I see that, and I'm sorry, I was out of it, right? Very satisfied those things, and I got it. Okay, yeah. Okay.
And again, it wasn't a goal of our, the caveat was, it wasn't a goal of ours to measure particularly amenities, but it was, we threw it in there just to see what it is. And the conclusion was people love the amenities, okay, that use them. And you know, things like the yacht club and farmers market are high. Parks and walking trails, you know, we have a lot. I mentioned here, John, the walking trails, you know, we brought that up before when we asked about, opportunities for improvement and walking trails. With that number there, you know, maybe we should be doing a little more with walking trails.
Bernie, Becky's waiting.
Becky?
Hey there, I think one of the beauty of this slides of amenities is that we have a very active community. We have a very diverse community. You can tell by these different amenities that we have people from all over the age span using our amenities, and that's something that we need to embrace as we move forward because we're diverse in our age. And that's one of the reasons I think that we have so many opportunities to do things. But the fact that we're out there using these parks and these walking trails and these pools, is impressive considering we have an older community, so to speak. So that's a positive takeaway from these slides. The other piece that these slides don't show, which I think Mr. Viola has actually really expressed exquisitely today, is that, for example, look at the golf club, look at the statistics of residents that use the golf club, look at the money that we've put in the golf club, look at the positive return that we've gotten on the golf club. The golf course and club is a really good example of where you place an investment and they will come, because people from the outside have recognized that this golf area in Ocean Pines is quite desirable. And perhaps because the grill is new, we might want to upgrade the grill, you know, as we move forward in terms of its comfort level, so that you're creating more of a club-like ambiance where that higher end buyer can come in and participate in the amenities, so that we generate more income there. So conversely, when you look at the dog park and you look at the amount of acreage that the dog park is utilizing in the area that it is, it's something that can be looked at strategically. If you've got 8% of your residents only using the dog park and you have that much acreage being used for it, can it be scaled down? Can it be redesigned? Can it be put in a different place so that you can, for example, in the future, strategically look at parking for the racket club, which is desperately needed down there. So there's lots of stories that can be created out of these last two slides.
Is there a creative way to handle parking at the racket facility? You know, I mean, you know, solve the issue without spending a lot. I mean, they're
Right.
like earlier, John.
It's not just at the, and she's right, on everything with the racket sports. There are limitations on how much parking we can, just from a wetlands or whatever, but we are trying to make it more efficient. The parking we have, and we're working on that, but there's just so much I can add. I really can't add anymore, but I can make it more efficient. The walking trails, we're working on that. That's a takeaway. We're going to continue.
Keep in mind, this is a 5-year direction, and when you're out there, John, I don't have an operational expertise. You know, I have a little bit earlier in my career. I don't know the bylaws. I just know marketing research and strategic planning process. So
I have a question.
Yes.
Just a simple question. I have a dog. I don't use the dog park. So people have to buy I never looked into it. You have to buy a pass.
You have to get
And is that tracked every time they use it? No, there's no, isn't there something? So you know how many people buy? I mean, is it?
Oh, we know how many people have the permits, if that's what you're asking. As far as the usage, how many times they go in there, I don't believe we do have that, but we do have to know how many people go with the permits, yes.
Not a lot.
I don't have the number, but I don't.
You can't pull that out.
And again, I use the dog park, and the people that are there, for the most part, like it. I mean, it could be cleaned a little bit better, and sometimes there's a lot of brush on the ground, stuff like that, but overall, it's a great place.
I think it's nice. I don't use it, but I think it's very nice.
yeah, this is an example of if it was 80% usage and these numbers are like this, we'd want to dig into what's the issue there, what can we do to improve it? Or if it was a sea of red, you know, it was like 1.0 or something, or 2.0, they're extremely dissatisfied. We might want to look at how can we improve it. So no disrespect of those who use the dog park.
I just wanted to comment, Bernie, you know, when you think about all the amenities and things like this that we have throughout the community, the having as many things as we do have, you know, is for the benefit of the whole community. Not everybody uses all the amenities. That's the argument we have to deal with all the time. Well, why should I have to support golf in my homeowner's assessment? Well, yeah, maybe you don't play golf or use it, but maybe you're using the yacht club, or maybe you're using the pools, or maybe you're using the dog park, and all of that is paid for. You know, the association fees have in the past have never covered all the amenities and all the things that we have. And so again, this is, to me, this is the the biggest point here is we have so many things.
Yeah.
And nobody uses everything. It's
Correct.
And that was something that came out of the last go round of survey also was people use the amenities, but nobody uses all of the amenities. And the ones that they use, and the ones that they don't, they don't.
Right.
So.
And Larry, what I would say to that is, why do you support the golf course if you don't golf? Because it helps to lower your HOA fee.
Yeah. Well, it does now.
And it raises the value of your home.
Yeah.
It's the value of the community.
I would just look at that, right? Nobody uses all of them. Maybe you find some people who, odds are you use a couple. And it's one of the reasons why you came to Ocean Pines. But I'm just looking up there, the 5 that are up there. I don't use 4 of them, but I'd like to. Maybe I will. But you know, when you individualize and say, oh, I don't use 4 out of 5, oh, I shouldn't have to pay. No, what's best for Ocean Pines right now? The amenities and everything is what's best for Ocean Pines, and you're right. That's why your house values and everything else. It's all interlocked.
Yeah. And we try to look at the value of amenities, and we'll continue to look at that to help the communication process of what they bring to the property values. By the way, did look at property values. Property values are up over 38% in the past 3 years. It's a compounded rate of 11.5%. And Sea Colony was flat.
Oh. Why? I'm sorry I even said that.
Yeah, so Bayside had increased, I believe. Anyway, 10 conclusions and implications. Frank, this is your role here, okay? He's gonna pass them out while we're talking, but, so we went through this. I think I'm really pleased with the discussion. I think this is what our committee wanted. And those of you online, I appreciate you speaking up and providing your point of view. What we're passing out right now is basically a one-page summary of what we're going to share on the next 3 slides. So if people want to make comments, board members that are on the phone, you can refer to them. Amy sent it out yesterday, I believe.
Yes.
But other than some of the discussion on communication, and we made some notes, and Helen has taken notes here. The conclusions are pretty solid. These are the committee's conclusions based on looking at the data. What I'm looking for here, what we're looking for is implications. Do you agree with the implication? Did we miss anything? So again, first conclusion is, compared to other HOAs, we have more amenities than anybody else except the villages, which is in Florida. And it is definitely something we can leverage, but we should continue to invest in the community and at the same time controlling expenses. It's that balance that you talked about, John, of not building a Taj Mahal, but trying to do the best you can with the money that we have. And my compliments to the board and you, John, and your team for what you've done over the past 3 years. Ocean Pines, the largest community in Worcester County. Again, we need to continue to leverage that as much as possible and as often as possible. When compared to Worcester County, we're a little bit less diverse, a little bit older, with slightly higher income and education levels, and a higher percentage of homeowners. What that speaks to me, one of the things in there is Ocean Pines should continue to embrace our diversity and monitor our demographics, because I think we are a changing community. It's getting a little bit younger, more families coming in. We only had 1 data point, so we couldn't say that for sure, but inclusion for all. I would also say this speaks to committees and engagement and involvement. There's opportunities to take advantage of these, I'll call them older, higher educated individuals that can contribute to the success of the community. So, you know, we have 14 committees now. We may be recommending another one, or what else can we do to get engagement of the community and leveraging these resources that we have. We do a great job now. And that's all this is saying, is there's an opportunity to continue that. The crime rate is extremely low. To me, we took at this as, with safety being ranked #1 importance, we should be very proud of it. But we should continue to invest in, you know, the police force and what we're doing to improve safety. And just really, you know, we recognize this as a communication opportunity, and to educate the public going forward. Should I give my personal point of view here? Is when you enter Ocean Pines, you should have a really nice banner out there that says, "Welcome to the safest community in Maryland." Why? Because it's the most important thing to them, and we do a fantastic job. Why not remind them every time they drive into the community? That's just Bernie's point of view, but.
Yeah, Bernie, I have a comment on that. The focus, I think, that we usually take when we talk about safety is police. But we don't talk about as much is the fire and EMS services. And, what I've observed in the last few years is that we've had, I think, 3 or 4 major house fires. And where I lived on the other side of the bridge, there were 0 in my neighborhood in the 20-some years that I lived there. So, I think that's a startling number to me. And I think it speaks to the fact that we need to consider fire and EMS services as part of the safety infrastructure. We don't get a lot of information about EMS, what kind of focus their calls, the needs that their calls address. But I just want to kind of put that on the radar here as part of what we need to focus on communication wise. Yeah. And I think fire safety probably is something that we need to focus on, particularly when it comes to the communication end of things.
Good. And by the way, for those people that are on the phone and not on a committee or the board, we are going to have an open discussion, public comments once we get through this. To me, we talked earlier about conclusions and implications should lead to goals. This is an example where why wouldn't you want to be the safest community over the next 5 years? Why not continue that? That's an example of, I'm not saying that it has to be a goal, but it falls out. It's important to people, do a great job. Let's maintain it. Let's invest in that. Let's continue that and communicate it. Josh, the next slide. So again, the conclusion was we had a great financial track record with great performance, and total amenities are profitable. And we should strive to continue that positive financial performance while better communicating amenity profitability. Do you agree with that, John? Next up, and we're going to break for 10 minutes of public comments and 20 minutes of discussion on these to see if we missed anything or if you disagree with any of these. Ocean Pines property owners are very satisfied and would recommend Ocean Pines. We should continue to track satisfaction, so we might have an annual or semi-annual satisfaction survey and aspire to improve where possible. We did say 65% of people said very or extremely satisfied. What if we got that up to 80%? That might be a KPI, John, down the road. I mean, that would be an example of a measurable KPI on customer satisfaction.
And for those who don't know what KPI is, it's key performance indicators.
Thanks. The largest gap between what is important, we've hammered this pretty hard, maintenance of infrastructure, community appearance, and HOA fee value for the money. We should have prioritized those 3 things when it comes to spending. And yet at the same time, keeping that assessment, that balance of not going too crazy building Taj Mahals, but keeping assessment fees reasonable and appropriate. We struggled with the wording on this. At one point we said, in line with inflation. We said keep them, neutral. But we just think that there may be things that come up, but we want to minimize that as much as possible. And the recent action that you took is phenomenal. 3 more conclusions. Higher positive support for investing in current amenities versus new amenities. Those that use amenities are very satisfied. We should continue to improve amenities, track amenity usage as much as possible. What we said is in our survey, it wasn't a clear tracking of it. Wherever we can, we should try to track it. And potentially satisfaction and return on investment. So I think one of the things that we've talked about is just making sure people are aware of how profitable some of the amenities are. I pick on pickleball, just but my wife plays it, and very small percentage of the homeowners use it. But when I look at it as far as it's the biggest pickleball facility on the Eastern Shore, we're doing more and more with tournaments and things like that, it's an opportunity to make money. It's that example of if you're at Hershey and you had 5 brands, and you're going to invest in your most profitable brand. It might be the biggest, but you're going to grow, you're going to help the community out by taking advantage of that situation. Core values, we should adopt, embrace, and activate the 6 core values of integrity, accountability, collaboration, respect, sustainability. We added in transparency because that was identified as an issue in the survey, even though I might have jumped over it pretty quickly today. But it was like an issue. Transparency could be perception. We've taken a lot of work to make our committee meetings like, again, on the one hand, we're probably the most transparent homeowners association in Maryland. On the other hand, there's, maybe a perception issue. So I think the board has taken some great, actions, and I was just involved in the setup of this meeting and making sure this meeting is public, making sure your board meetings are now online, not just on YouTube. So I think we're moving definitely in the right direction. And finally, about opportunities, we talked about profitability, improving profitability, customer satisfaction through electronic voting, higher non-resident amenity fees, and potentially enhanced enforcement of covenants and regulations. Out of all that data, which I promise you won't see again, these were our 10 conclusions and implications. And Josh, if we go to the next slide. So we will have a discussion here and then open it up if there's any public comments. But did we miss anything? Those of you that have a hard copy, do you disagree with wording at all? We spent a lot of time on the wording. They went back and forth. Were there any surprises? This meeting has exceeded my expectations as far as the board's involvement and reaction and engagement, as well as John and our committee members. So, and then, do you agree on the So, again, for discussion based on what you see so far. We had a lot of discussion throughout. I think my biggest takeaway is a lot of these are communication issues. But I made a lot of notes and I know Helen has taken more detailed notes. Comments, questions on the 10 conclusions that we came up with. First, board members or committee members, and we'll open up to the public.
I agree with you that it was interesting to me to see how much of this relates back to communication. And when I look at these 10 conclusions, a question, that I take away from this and the emails that the board gets from the public is that the public is not as aware as they should be of what the return on investment gets them. And I think that that's a communication opportunity for us to explain how the strong financial performance in each of the amenities and the amenities as a collective, how that impacts our assessment, how that impacts our depreciation and our our investment in the depreciation expense in our I'm losing my word.
Getting a little off track.
Okay. At any rate, I think those are communication opportunities also to have people understand that this isn't just about being profitable. It's that the profitability benefits each of us financially.
And just to add in with that, the community should understand that, this is a not-for-profit, and our amenities by our scrolls are to break even. That's where we're supposed to be. Now, the reality of that is if we make money at the amenities, it lowers the overall assessment. But, and over the years, the amenities, because of the way our documents are written, the amenities as an overall number, not just individual. So as has happened in the years with Aquatics, that was always losing money, we didn't shut the pools down.
Yeah.
And, golf, we didn't shut the golf course down. We're at the point now where we are making money on those amenities. But the bottom line is the goal for each amenity is to break even. The goal is not to make a profit. We are making profit at this point, and that's bringing down our assessment. So, a lot of this, and I always get hung up on this transparency thing. It is the first thing anybody says when they're running for the board, oh, I'll be more transparent. I got to tell you, we put out so much information, and quite honestly, so much of it is ignored. Because the information will go out, and the next thing you know, somebody's asking, well, what about this? Well, we put it out 4 times. So while communication, a lot of this stuff is communication, man, I just have a hard time with this transparency thing because we've got Josh putting stuff out all the time. We've got board meetings that get poorly attended. Look at today. We have, in addition to the committee members and Doug Park, we've got 2 additional people online.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I don't want to go off on that tangent.
But we do have increased virtual attendance at our
Not
board
only
meetings.
specific to this organization. It's very hard to get people to read and engage.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah,
So-
I've got a comment.
So Doug and Becky are waiting.
Doug and Becky.
Let's see,
Yeah, you might want to mute. So a couple of things. Number one, looking at this list of conclusions and implications, there's none of them there that I disagree with. I think they're pretty straightforward, and they sort of tell the story as a summary of the survey itself. A couple of things, and I think Colette mentioned it, and to a certain extent Larry mentioned it. I want to expand on the idea of communicate and basically kind of add in the idea of educate. There's so many people out there that are not educated as to what the amenities are and certain sort of general operation of the Ocean Pines environment. I mean, I dare say that the 1,800 and some odd people that entered that answered the survey are probably not the ones that we need to target. They're the ones that are probably already listening and have some vested interest in not only participating in the survey, but obviously anticipating the results and any things that come out of that survey. So I guess my question would be, if we're thinking in terms of strategic planning, one of the things is how do we reach that other group? How do we reach the folks that have been traditionally, for lack of a better term, unreachable? And will that yield any benefit for us? Because certainly, a strategic plan will fall in, I'm going to agree with Larry. The idea is like you can put as much information out there, whether they're consuming it or not, we can't really control. And I guess the other thing we should at least socialize, if nothing else, is to how is there anything we can do to, again, educate and reach out to a larger portion of our membership. And I think that needs to be considered in the strategic plan going forward. You guys are still muted.
I
We have
captured
2 more
that.
hands up.
Thank you for your input. But education is key and how to reach the other group that's non-participatory. It's kind of interesting, and going back to Larry's point about, maybe frustration with people not being aware. But I mean, when we fielded the survey, I remember the comments, what a stupid survey. Why would they ask this? Why would they ask residents if they've used a facility in the last 6 months? All those types of questions. I just tried to shut it out. And bottom line, 95% of people are very happy, and that's projectable. 65% are either very or extremely happy.
And a certain percentage of people will never be
Yeah.
happy. Just saying.
I would like to.
Yes.
Impressed with the slide that said that amenities are about $4 or 0.5% of the HOAs for 2021. I want to get on top of a mountain and scream that on top.
We'll need to see
All the
that.
negative golfers, thank you.
And that's the perception that is so damaging to the community, because so many people keep fussing about the HOA fee, saying, why am I paying for all these amenities I don't use, which everybody said more than once. But when you look at the actual numbers, we're talking about $4 out of the total assessment that goes for this. And people don't understand that.
And if you think
Which-
about $4 for your property value,
Right.
seriously.
Seriously.
And
Keep us moving, go ahead.
I just have a comment to build on that, that maybe we need to take better control of the narrative that's out there.
Agreed.
And how can we do that? Because you open up these newspapers, there's a heck of a lot of negativity about Ocean Pines being published in our local newspapers. So how do we flip that? How do we, and a lot of it's not factual.
And
a lot of it is spin. So how do we?
No, maybe it's a postcard with that graphic on it.
Yeah.
Did you know?
Well, so when we did this sort of strategic planning with the Realtor organization, and one of the things we talked about value proposition, but we actually generated a mailer that went out to the membership that says, this is how your dues are spent. A postcard.
And-
no, you don't even need words. Really.
Information gets,
The letter that John sent with our bill, I thought was a terrific.
that information gets out there. People, people want to hammer on the amenities, but if they looked at it, if they look at what we spend for our police services and for our fire department and EMS, I mean, they are huge numbers.
But that is something
Part of the assessment.
shared at the annual meeting.
So I don't mean to cut people off, but I think people know me. I start on time and end on time. So we're going to end at 11 o'clock. I'm sure other people have other things to do. But I think, did Becky have a comment or somebody else online?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I need a clarification for one point. Someone shared that Ocean Pines is not a for-profit community. And I understand I understand how that was shared in relation to the amenities not making money. But my question is, if Ocean Pines doesn't make money, how does Ocean Pines survive if Ocean Pines doesn't raise dues? So I don't know where the nonprofit piece came from. Is that a piece that's in our bylaws or our homeowners association piece? So maybe that is something that needs to be looked at from a board standpoint. I mean, this is a big community with running a lot of money every year. So somehow I don't understand how that paradigm fits into survival. So that's something that might need to be.
I mean, I think what Larry said was amenities are meant to break even.
Oh, no, her question is, we are not a nonprofit, we are a not-for-profit. And that's how we are licensed. And so we can't change that. So the way the community survives is through the assessments. Now, if our amenities are making money, that lowers the amount of assessment that we have to charge the homeowners. If the amenities are losing money, then we have to charge more in the assessment.
Well, then that is really a critical piece.
I'm going to cut this off. I'm sorry. We're not going to solve.
Oh, no.
But I do want to end at 11 and I want to open up for public comments, but we're not here to, basically debate how we're going to do things or what we should communicate and things like that. We really just want to do we agree with the conclusions and implications? I will open up for public comments or anybody else that has anything else. Do you agree? Did we miss anything? Is there other things that we should have looked at?
You have two public comments up there, or a couple, I don't know.
Sherry?
Sherry?
Hello there, how you doing? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, they're muted so you can talk. Go ahead.
Okay, so I put a public comment in the chat so everybody could see it and go back to it. I would like to see the strategic planning start to implement very quickly a social media committee. Social media today is becoming larger than life. And what that is doing to the Ocean Pines community is there's a lot of destruction out there. We've got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and when you put out, and you've got the forum, you've got Joe's forum out there. When you put something negative out there, people do not take the time to read what's real. But if they had something official from the Ocean Pines Association, like the committee, like Colette had mentioned something about controlling the narrative, is people are used to going into groups and being able to talk. We need and this social media committee has to be different than the communications, because communications encompasses a lot of IT infrastructure and things like that. Social media is big enough and bigger than life that it needs a committee. And that's my recommendation, that you start looking into that, but not look into it to a point where you put it up on slides. This needs to be on sooner than later, because Ocean Pines Association needs to get in front of what's going on out there, and it's bigger than life. In just a short period of time, I started a group to kind of counteract for the residents, the ROC group, that would counteract some of the negativity, but still allow people to communicate. That has grown to over almost 1,100 people in less than 6 months. So you can see that instead of me trying to do this on my own, we need something that the association is actually behind before it actually just destroys the community. So that's my comment.
List. I've discussed this with the board, and we are going to take that on as providing some insight or recommendation. I don't know that it's going to be immediate, but it is something that we want to work on. Thank you, Sherry. Anybody else? And again, if you have to leave at 11, this was great. I understand, but I want to make sure I leave it open to any public comments or anything else. Who else we got?
That's it.
That's it. Josh, would you go to the very last slide? It talks about next steps or something like that. So we're not going to get into brainstorming goals. Actually, the one on Ocean Pines proposed strategic planning timeline. You went into the appendix. Sorry. Just to wrap up where we're going to go from here. It's like right inside the appendix, the last two slides. And sorry, Josh, Josh has taught me how.
It is or is not in the appendix.
It's inside, it's in part of the main presentation, the last two slides.
Gotcha.
So eventually, we'll get to that one too. Yeah. So I think it might be one before that, and then we're going to call it a day. Okay, this is before. This is an example of something that I've used with our committee. This is what we want to get to. We don't want to overcomplicate things, but we see it as potentially a one-page plan that includes a vision statement. It includes what your key goals are, what your key strategies are, and eventually, KPIs and everything else. There's also something called enablers in there. Which is what do we have to have in place in order to enable. I would say the technology in this room was an enabler to allow us to communicate more transparently. That's an enabler. So that was an investment in that. Values, incorporating values, they might be the enabler that allows things to happen. But we want to get to this point, Josh, and you can go forward or backward, whatever you want to do here. Next steps. Depending on the progress of the meeting, we want to go and establish goals and then start to get consensus on goals. We will look for a meeting we'll recap this meeting. I made some comments, Helen made some comments, or is tracking notes. I'm going to also do a survey monkey, just quick. What did you think of the meeting? How would you do it different? Give you an opportunity to expand further on any ideas that you might have. I believe always in getting feedback. What do you think of the meeting on the 1 to 5? What could we do better? And then we will be scheduling a next work session. This is a 5-year plan. Everybody has a lot on their plate. I just booked a 3-week trip to Europe in April. I'm leaving next Tuesday. It'll probably be late April, early May, if the board is up to it, where we have another session where we start to work on goals. But you will see in this packet, a copy of this presentation, starts to lay out the groundwork for what a goal is. It's important to really get to that steps. But this was a key meeting. One of my concerns was not having full engagement, and you definitely exceeded my expectations. So appreciate everybody's time and commitment to this meeting and to the process. And again, to those people that set up the meeting and were here yesterday, at one point it wasn't working, and they were pretty calm about it. But they made it happen. And there was a number of people here that did that. So that's where we're at. And thanks for your time. Again, really good meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.